Welcome everyone joining the webinar. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're based. My name is Antonio Franchi. I am with the European Space Agency. I'm heading up a team called 5G, 6G, NTN Program Office. I'm very happy to host this webinar today. Thank you very much for joining the webinar, The Way Forward, Satellite and Cellular Convergence. This is part of GSOA webinar series in association with Connectivity Business News. It's my great pleasure to introduce my speaker for the webinar today. I have a very distinguished panelists of internationally renowned players in the SATCOM field. I'd like to introduce Jaume Sampera, CEO of Cellular, Jennifer Manner, Senior VP of Regulators Affairs at EchoStar, Faisal Zia, Technical Director at GSMA, and Bruno Fromont, Chief Technical Officer at Intelsat. As you see from the composition of the panel, we have ample representation, both from the satellite network operator ecosystem, as well as from the mobile network operator ecosystem. The topic is satellite and cellular convergence. And you might have, if you're familiar with this market, you might have noticed in the last couple of weeks, two major events, both Mobile World Congress in Barcelona 2024, and the Satellite Business Show in Washington, D.C. last week, had plenty of topics covering terrestrial network, non-terrestrial network, and the role of 5G in a global connectivity scenario. So the topic is very hot and very relevant today. I'm very pleased to share with you that as part of the satellite ecosystem at Satellite Business Show, we have been awarded the very prestigious award. The satellite industry has been awarded the Via Satellite 2023 Satellite Technology of the Year Award, recognizing the collective effort of the satellite industry in promoting the role of non-terrestrial network into the 3GPP standardization. This is a fantastic achievement, which is I'm very happy to share here with you at this webinar, just very freshly received last week. Of course, it's a contribution leading up many years of work from many players in the satellite industry, starting with GSOA, many operators like EchoStar, Inmarsat, Intelsat, Cellular, and of course, many industry representatives like Thales and many others individual contributors. So I think without further ado, I would like to start this panel today. And perhaps the first set of questions I'd like to ask my panelists is on standardization, following from specifically this achievement, this award that we received. I would like to start for all the panelists. So the space sector efforts in the 3GPP 5G standardization have been recognized from the Via Satellite Award. Recognized as Satellite Technology of the Year. What does it mean for the industry? And is this enough for satellite now to be part of 5G and any future standard leading to 6G? So I'd like to open with this generic question about standardization, perhaps starting with the first speaker. I'd like to ask Jaume to give his view, his impression about what does it mean for the industry, and is it enough? Please, Jaume.
Thank you very much, Antonio. Congratulations for this prize to all of you. Okay, I think that what we have done it's a first step on this long run of taking the standards to the satellite industry. There's still Release 18 and Release 19 to be approved, that this become a reality. And I think that one of the main issues that we have in front of us, one of the main challenges, that this becomes something more than just a super interesting technology, is the chipset manufacturer. We need that the chipset manufacturer they invest in taking this challenge that we all together, the mobile and the satellite industry, has put on the table, and to make it become a reality. Today we have already some chipset manufacturer has released 17 chipsets, some in GEO, some in LEO. Okay, they are coming. Okay, but I think that there's still a way forward in order that this becomes a universal. Because the success will be when all the devices are prepared to connect to both terrestrial and non-terrestrials. if we have chipsets that only works with terrestrial or non-terrestrial, then will be exactly the same that we were before. Okay, we will have different devices for different aspects. What we need is a full integration of both, and this will become a reality with this availability of the full device.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jaume. And let's see, Bruno, do you agree with Jaume? Do you think regarding standardization, indeed, and perhaps mention on the chipset as well, if you have a view on that? Thank you.
Well, Antonio, I mean, it's fair to say that, yeah, I mean, by and large, I mean, I agree with some of the Jaume's conclusion and guidelines for the future. We've been very active at Intelsat with 3GPP, forums to push the NTN standards. We always had that vision of basically a unified 5G and terrestrial space and network, backward compatible with each other. And 5G, frankly, was really the opportunity, the golden opportunity for the space actors to join a bigger scale market. And it takes a village to do that. So we want to see adoption, and to get adoption, we want, cost-effective terminals. Hence, the need for chipsets. There are other ways to do it. We have started to do it. We can talk a bit about it later with software-defined radios and other ways to provide 5G connectivity. There's a lot of things we need to do as an industry, and it's not a slam dunk. We need investments into the ecosystem. So overall, it's just the beginning, but it will unlock innovation and markets down the road.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Jennifer, what is your take on this standardization roadmap and path? Is that the beginning, or is that already a big achievement where we are at the moment?
I think it's a huge achievement, but it's a step in the right direction. This is something I've been waiting for since MSS ATC 21 years ago, first with a terrestrial component, the idea that I can use, and I can't show you my phone because I'm talking on it right now. So the fact that I can use my Android today with a 3GPP standard to complete a text call is pretty cool. In being able to use it for much more will be even cooler. But as folks says, the ecosystem has to grow. We also have to have adoption. We need to have sufficient spectrum available, which means we need harmonized global spectrum that's available to support this effort. I mean, there's still many pieces. We have to get this to be affordable. One of the SDGs from the UN and from the ITU is, of course, connectivity for all. So we have to make sure that this gets to be that we can leverage the economies of scale, and this gets into all the phones, no matter where you are. So I think there's still more to do. We're also just a flag. We're also still working at the ITU on the IMT 2020 standard, and later we talk about 6G, perhaps a little bit about IMT 2030, and that's not as important perhaps as 3GPP for the ecosystem, but it is something that countries turn to when they're looking at bringing in new and innovative services like this. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. And last but not least, I'd like to hear from Faisal. Faisal here is a GSMA, so representing the mobile network operator world. And how do you see that from the MNO side, Faisal, about this achievement, and why is standard relevant for the satellite as well as for the mobile world?
Thanks, Antonio, and really, really pleased to be here. I think Jaume hit the nail on the head. This is just the beginning. A recognition of the space sector efforts in 3GPP standardization is really significant, and as we said, just the beginning. But industry acknowledgement of partners coming together to drive this absolutely important, because it's satellite technology within 3GPP standardization efforts. So I think that's absolutely key. The second bit that I'd like to talk about is enhanced collaboration. You look at the list of partners there, and it really is an ecosystem effort in order to drive it. And this is just the beginning. There's so many more players, so many more opportunities that we need to add into the mix. I always say that every month we're getting new announcements from SNOs working with MNOs on this the release of satellite technology. So it's important, and validation of the efforts of the work that we're doing in that regard. I guess the key thing for us is to add GSMA on the logos next time for the 3GPP standardization efforts, because we've just done the partnership agreement with ESA and indeed Cellular. So certainly looking forward to further collaborating and working much more closely on this important area.
Thank you, Faisal. Indeed, let me underwrite indeed this agreement, collaboration between the various industry, and particularly with GSMA, ESA, and GSOA, kind of represent the spirit of this convergence between the satellite and the terrestrial world. So we very much look forward to celebrate together more achievements in the future years. Of course, Mobile World Congress was a great celebration where we had the first non-terrestrial network summit in the center of the Mobile World Congress week, and that was oversubscribed by twice the capacity of the room available. So that's a testament of how important it is, this convergence. But let me move to, thank you very much to our panelists. I'd like to move forward to kind of the next question. We talk about standardization, but we want to go really to the core. Why are we doing this? What are the 5G market use cases? Where is that satellite adds more value, best value to the terrestrial 5G world? So let me just start with a general question on 5G and 6G for the panelists. How does the convergence of satellite and terrestrial network impact existing business models and competitive dynamics within the telecommunication industry? So what strategies can the providers adopt to adapt to these changes and maintain competitive advantage thanks to the help of terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks? And perhaps I'd like to start with Faisal to start with, because this is kind of, is the NTN expanding on the terrestrial business model? How do you see the business model changing and evolving thanks to a combined TN and TN offering?
Yeah, and convergence is really reshaping the way that the telcos look at this. New dynamics, new challenges coming into the mix. Satellites offer things like resiliency, accessibility to remote areas, terrestrial networks, focusing on providing that value that they already do. So when we look at this, we look at a point of view of augmentation and hybrid networks. The networks of the future are going to be based on a mixture of terrestrial, non-terrestrial, and indeed satellite networks. Now, in that regard, I think that this is where the cost effectiveness of the solutions is going to be absolutely key. But in terms of impact on the business models, seamless convergence between the two different types of technology, that's going to enable new market growth. And then in terms of leveraging the hybrid solutions, I think that it's playing on the strengths of both satellite and terrestrial networks. So, we've talked about MNOs focusing on urban connectivity, satellites focusing on rural connectivity, how that will align with one another. Enabling new models like IoT, for example. I'll talk a little bit later around the business models and how that piece comes into the mix. But I think it's really going to be an interesting intersection between the two of those areas. How those will work with one another.
Thank you very much, Faisal. Indeed, I mean, the 5G, 6G global economy is projected to be in the order of trillions of dollars in the next 10 years. And of that, hundreds of billions of dollars are attributable to the complementary use of satellites. Bruno, do you have a view on this economy and evolving business case or business models to indeed to contribute to enable the 5G, 6G economy thanks to the global seamless coverage that Faisal was talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I think it's important to address, I think, the trends that made this possible. First of all, just talking and focusing on the space industry, the falling cost to access space independently from 5G and 6G efforts, have been, tremendous. We're talking about, reducing the bandwidth cost by a factor of 10 in the last, 10 years. It's been a rapid, evolution and innovation in that industry. Look at the launch market, the cost of satellites, falling, and leveraging the terrestrial technology in space to make really, really cost-effective solutions. So that's one aspect. The second is, I think Faisal was mentioning, the urban versus, connected. I think it's just not the space industry moving towards, you know, that convergence. Of course, you need two to dance, right? The MNOs are also probably hitting a wall to serve the underserved. They asked for a lot of spectrum for years, but only to densify the dense areas. And so at the WRC, I remember Mario Manievich, you know, was made a request to the space actors to actually bridge this digital divide. So it's kind of us acknowledging that, okay, well, if we need to really to make this happen, I mean, we'll need really both solutions to be hybrid networks really to deliver that. So I think when it comes to the business models to make this successful, we have different ways to do it. Either we can work independently or we can work together. And it translates into the business models, I think, and the spectrum we leverage. If we leverage, you know, MNO spectrum, I think we're going to have to evolve towards revenue share and to address also compatibility at the borders, you know, between terrestrial and space. When I say MNOs, it could be terrestrial actors or service providers. These shared models, I think, allow us to, you know, reduce the risk, share the risk, also access, you know, a wider market very quickly, which is important to amortize the cost of launching these constellations to enable these, you know, these services. It's going to take, again, a lot of money to make this happen, and it's going to take time. So I think the collaboration will be essential in the way we even share the revenue, and of course there will be always, you know, other type of potential models, like you look at Apple, what they did, like working around, you know, the let's say the mobile operator, but only like really big actors like this could afford to try to go at it alone, right? So you're gonna have to look at that very carefully.
Thank you very much indeed, Bruno. I think you hinted at a lot of very good points. Jennifer, what's your take on this evolving business model, especially for the SNO? So this satellite network operator, is this a great opportunity? Is that opportunity for consolidation between MNO and SNO, like Bruno was talking about? How do you see the evolving business model as the TN and NTN convergence blends into each other and provide a seamless global service offering? Is there a need for change in the business at all, or what are the opportunities that you see?
I think we have to start with the, and I agree with everything my colleague said, but I think we have to start with the fact that as a user, I don't care who I get my connectivity with. I just want connectivity. And so you can think about, well, just taking direct to device using a cell phone, right? What's the best way to get that? And from an economic perspective, so certainly partnering with an MNO makes sense. And I'm not commenting whether it's using MSS spectrum or terrestrial spectrum at this time. I think we'll talk about that a little later. But maybe, you know, but is everyone going to want to spend the whatever it's going to be, 50 cents, $1, you know, more a month to have that service? Or is the right approach an app that when I, you know, for some people, also, you know, do enough people really care to have it at all? You know, but I think you have to look at all the different avenues we have. You know, you're still going to use it for automotive. I think is a really exciting area. We're not talking about, you know, true automotive connectivity. You know, what Sirius did and all that is XM are terrific, but taking it to the next level, I don't think we've even started to scratch the surface of what this could mean. So I wish I had more foresight. You know, so I don't know what the business case is. I don't think anyone does now. As Bruno said, you've got the Apple Global Star model, which you have to be very rich. You've got the, you know, T-Mobile SpaceX model. You've got the go it alone model, which our company and others are looking at, you know, and you partner, you know, on a global basis or in country. So there's so many different approaches. So I think that's one of the things that's going to have to pan out. We also have to see what the demand is. I think the demand is going to be astronomical, but that depends also on price and timing for availability. But I agree with Bruno. It's going to take you have to get the ecosystem to develop, and we're still not really there. We're at the very early reaches. So I think you're still at the very early reaches of what this is going to look like. Thank you.
Fantastic, very good. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Joma, what's your take on this topic?
I like very much what Jennifer says, okay? At the end, the user doesn't care about if it's connected to a satellite or to a mobile industry. And we have to take into account that we are talking about two industries, the satellite and the mobile, that have an absolute different size. If we're talking on IoT, there are already 2 to 3 billion devices connected to the mobile networks, and we were talking to the ones connected to the satellite, we're talking 4 millions. Then the size of the customer base of the mobile industry, it's 1,000 times, okay, the size of the users connected to the satellite one. Okay, then we believe in a model where price is included, that there have to be a seamless transparency between mobile and satellite, and that the satellite industry has to have clear that we are going to be, okay, the extension of coverage of the mobile industry. That is the one that has the customer, that is the one that has the implementation on the territory, okay, and as Jeff said, we're in front of a huge market that we never imagined that we may have this quantity of users as a satellite operator, that they will be coming in and out for the coverage of the mobile operator to the satellite without even knowing who belongs the satellite coverage to, because they will be customers of the Verizon or the Movistar of the Geo-Reliance of the world. Just to put an example, these 4 million devices that today the whole satellite industry has today, okay, we, as you know, okay, we are not already in commercial mode. We are going to start commercial mode by the end of this year. We have already signed for 7 million devices in binding orders. And I'm sure that this is just the small part of the whole market that needs connectivity on a different price, on a different easy of usage that there are in the world today.
Fantastic. Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all panelists, for this section. Before we move to the next topic, I see there are lots of questions online put on the Q&A, which is great. Please keep putting questions. I would like to address a couple which are related to the topic we discussed. A lot of them are technical, which we'll get to that in a minute, but there are a couple on the topics we just discussed. The first one I see is for Intelsat specifically. And the question is, what is your plan to launch 5G NTN for broadband services? If any time, what timeline, in what frequency, and what are the use cases? So we talk about use cases in a minute, but perhaps I wonder if Bruno can just quickly address the question about Intelsat plans specifically.
Okay, so I think we have been, first of all, I wanted to clarify, I mean, when we talk about 5G and NTN, it doesn't mean direct to device. There are multiple ways to leverage, the 5G standards, including, and we're going to talk about it in terms of use case for the standard, FSS application. In other words, providing 5G access or using the 5G technology for the standard application that the satellite industry is serving today, right? Maybe with lower costs, greater flexibility, backward compatibility with the mobile network and roaming capabilities between terrestrial and satellite. So this is our first area of focus at Intelsat. We've been playing a lot with the physical, what we call, the physical layer of 5G. We've been running, developing, the waveform according to the NTN standard with some partners like Kratos and others. We've been running live tests on our satellites for the past, basically 18 months. And with, the launch of our, new GEO satellites, we're going to be able to offer 5G services starting in 2025 from a commercial launch perspective. And this is for again maritime aviation and terrestrial service for enterprise, for example. So for that it means developing a lot of the components, but I will stop there because I'm going to go too technical, but that's basically the time frame.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much. And I guess there's a follow-up question which is kind of related, and it links to the comment to the Faisal underlining the seamless connectivity. So it's for GSMA, but really for anyone to answer is, how does GSMA or all the panelists see the extent of the integration between mobile and satellite from 5G, from issues release 17 towards 19? In other words, how do you see this seamless connectivity happening? What is the extent of the integration of devices that you expect, switching between terrestrial and satellite? So what is the vision of seamless connectivity? I guess it's kind of an open question. Bruno already alluded to, there are different flavors of 5G and TN-NTN integration which are possible. Maybe Faisal, from the operator's point of view, mobile operator point of view, what would be the optimal seamless connectivity for a mobile network operator taking advantage of satellite?
I think we've talked about seamless connectivity. I think it's that user experience. At the end of the day, if you can switch between a 5G network, a 3G, a 4G, a 5G, an NTN network, whether it's HAPS or Hail or drones supporting it, and to do it in a seamless way where the end customer doesn't even realize what network that they're on, that would be the nirvana that we want to get to. There's a lot of steps on the way to do that, and part of that, I'll give a small example. In MWC, we launched a challenge with European Space Agency around mobility. Now, as part of one of those challenges is hybrid antennas. Having an antenna that supports both terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks, and there's a specific funding call for that to provide support around that. Now, that gives you an extent of, if we're doing that now, the integration that comes in the future, it has to be seamless. It has to be coexisting. And to take a point from the automotive sector, they're not going to have a separate antenna for terrestrial and a separate antenna for non-terrestrial. The economics are not there for them to want to do that. So we need to look at very much so converged networks and hybrid antenna solutions.
Very good. Thank you very much. That's great. And maybe we move on in a minute, but we talked about automotive a couple of times with Jennifer and Faisal. Besides the automotive, which is an obvious, very, very hot topic of market for the TN and TN integration, what are the other couple of 2 or 3 most promising use cases that we see where satellite provide obviously the coverage? We heard GSMA intelligence talks about 7% of the world population is not yet connected. But on the other hand, 70% of the planet is not yet connected by any communication, let alone cellular. So where do we see the use cases? Perhaps Jaume, besides automotive, how do you see TN and TN offering wherever satellite offer best contribution to the most promising use cases?
Of course, the largest sector by far will be logistics. Logistics is an amazing sector that needs to monitorize where the package, where the containers are in every moment. They have this desire from years ago, and they didn't succeed because of cost of the device and cost of the connectivity, which makes the business case absolutely impossible. Now what they see is that with the new capacity of having these standard devices that instead of 200 it will cost $20, okay, they will have the opportunity to connect all those things that they move around. All the logistic chains have been a struggle during these last years, now for the Canal de Suez, before for other reasons, okay, and this put more pressure even on the logistic chain. We believe that logistics will be the number one, although today what's sure is that the market will surprise us. Okay, it's we think, okay, that this will be the main use case, and then the reality will be just the other way around. Then on the binding orders that we have already signed, which are non-time sensitive binding orders, because the coverage that we are starting right now is global, but it's just what we call the daily service, which means several messages per day. Then what we see today is that in this daily use, what the most prominent use cases, it's agrotech. agrotech in certain countries like Brazil or US or Australia are just growing an incredible speed at the moment. There was a lot of agrotech companies that wanted to deploy the same devices that already have done in places where there is mobile coverage, and were stopped because the inability of doing that. Then I would think infrastructures, it's another important point, cattle management, but I'm sure that once we reach near real time personal IoT, it's the one that will give us a huge surprise on new use cases that we can never imagine.
Antonio, can I add one? Just, I think that's really important for us to think about, and it kind of goes to the future with 6G. I think climate change and monitoring, just EchoStar Mobile, one of our subsidiaries, just did a deal with our LoRa technology, not 3GPP, but still a standardized technology on monitoring for wildfires across Europe. So I think as we're seeing more climate change, whether it's flooding, we just had huge floods here in the US just from a regular rainstorm. I think you're going to see that more and more. And as we move to a 6G world where the internet of everything's going to be connected. And some of that I think is particularly well suited for space. And that's why I know we're going to talk about 6G later. I see satellite becoming even more important in a 6G world than perhaps in a 5G world.
Very good indeed. Bruno, any other use cases you would add?
Well, I agree with what has been mentioned so far. I mean, I want to reemphasize agriculture. It's going to be a huge market. Industry and energy, I would say energy monitoring, consumption. The sources of energy are, of course, becoming very critical, going to be monitored and are also delocalized. I mean, are spread in networks themselves. You would want to manage the ins and outs of solar panels everywhere and things like that. So that's a huge market. When it comes to automotive, I agree. Let's not forget that also it's a long-term play before we standardize. I think Faisal mentioned the antenna, but it takes about 7 years before you have a product and it actually makes it to the production line on a car. So of course, everybody's looking at this because it's a huge market, but it takes a while before you actually get in there, right?
Yeah. Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, okay, then maybe I would like to just close this topic on the use cases and move from use cases, talk a little bit more about the 5G TN and NTN technology. I can see that there are lots of questions online about how is this integration going to work, specifically with lots of questions on interference and spectrum management, but also on technology capability. So I would like to pose a question to the panelists that as the demand for seamless connectivity continues to grow, what technology innovations or technological advancements are critical for advancing integrated TN and TN infrastructure? We mentioned already the terminals, but what else is required? How can industry stakeholders collaborate to accelerate this technology pace of innovation? And maybe just in a single question, how can providers leverage the advancement in bandwidth allocation and multi-orbit management to enhance the performance and reliability of integrated networks? Because now suddenly we have a combination of networks on networks, where the non-terrestrial network part is already composed of a mixed service offering, where every single operator, either in partnership or by themselves, tend to offer a multi-orbit solution. That integrated with the terrestrial network, opening up a series of challenges, both on the network side, on the terminal side, user side, but also on the end-to-end system integration and interference and spectrum management. So what do you see all the major technological points and required advances for this topic? Maybe I'd like to hear perhaps from two panels, maybe Jaume more on the narrowband side, and perhaps Bruno on the broadband side. Let's try to cover the topic in general about the technological requirements to realize this full integration and to overcome indeed the challenges. Some of them already pointed out by the online Q&A. So maybe, I don't know who I want to start. Maybe Jaume, if you're okay to start.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Antonio. I think that I'm sorry about the insist, but I think that the main issue right now on the table is the terminals. And what you're talking is about integration, not just terrestrial and non-terrestrial, but between multi-orbits. Then the success of this industry will be on having a full roaming connectivity between terrestrial and non-terrestrial to non-terrestrial. All the different geo, MEO, LEO has its sense in this new game. And I think the integration of all will be the success of the industry.
Thank you.
I agree that terminals is a very important. I would argue that, frankly, the three components, the network, the terminal, of course, and the satellites will all, benefit from some coming innovations. On the terminal, I think, right off the bat, I think Jaume mentioned it at the opening. There are different ways you can address, a 5G waveform in the terminal. You have to work on the antenna technology, but at the modem level, we are currently working on 5G waveform with, x86 chips, which are, standard, and everything is software-based, software-defined. However, to get to the ultimate low-cost terminal, you need a chipset. I think at the Mobile World Congress, MediaTek announced, some development in Ku-band, which was, something we've been working with them for a while, and it's not done yet. It's, we're gonna have to go to mass production before we can benefit and realize the cost efficiency. But that's, if you think about it, I was mentioning the application, standard satellite application today. If the terminals can benefit from this type of chipsets, the costs, could be, again, reduced by an order of magnitude. And that's very significant. Then at the network level, we all, satellite to realize the promise of a hybrid network, we need to become mobile operators, right? So we are developing and putting together, the core network technology so that we can basically roam with mobile operators, relay information over the satellites, and provide 5G services. That's work in itself. Then if we're talking about multi-orbit arbitration between multi-orbits, we are starting, I don't know if you saw the announcement, but we are doing a lot of work in the aviation domain where, we have antenna that can switch between LEO and GEO and seamlessly. And, all that orchestration is taking shape as we speak. But frankly, as soon as we can benefit from the 5G technology, that's going to be even better. So there's a lot here. And I would even argue, even though, we can use 5G transparently over satellites, all the future constellation will use probably some sort of regenerative payload on board to basically act either as a base station for direct-to-device or to process more effectively the bandwidth on a more traditional satellite. So this is a lot, and a lot of investment to be deployed to make this happen.
Thank you. That's indeed base station in the sky, I think what Bruno's talking about. And that's great. There's a nice question from Akram online, talks about as 5G RAN becomes more softwareized, do you think future satellites will have 5G, 6G base station inside them to allow terrestrial satellite communication? And that's exactly the answer. Indeed, we are doing that. We are looking into that. ESA itself, we have two large projects to launch 5G base station in the sky, as well as an in-orbit laboratory to test 5G and 6G technologies. And I'm sure the Intelsat and others have similar plans. So yeah, thank you, Bruno, for answering that question. On the technical side, one thing we didn't talk about is an interesting question about Vanessa Gray. The question is, ITU is leading on pillar 3 of warning, dissemination, and communication. Jennifer talked about firefighting. This is similar. It's about warning, dissemination, and communication to ensure alerts can be sent and reach people at risk. And we've been promoting self-broadcast so that people can receive an alert on their phone. New developments in satellite are offering great opportunities, and the question is, how can ITU help to make sure mobile phones can receive alerts sent over satellite systems? This is a great question, and indeed, this is what satellite is good for, is broadcast and multicast and dissemination of information. what I can say is that one of the large projects we are managing in the European Space Agency is a large public-private partnership called 5G Emerge. 5G Emerge is led by the European Broadcasting Union, and it's a large project comprised of over 30 companies and more than 6 ESA member states. The idea is to promote 5G MBS, more multicast broadcast over satellite, and provide indeed a way not only for warning dissemination, but multicast broadcast in general, using the new emerging 5G standard, which coming out from release 17 and progressing in 18 and 19. So that's something to look up to. 5G Emerge is the name of the project, and is a European Space Agency sponsored or financed project. Sure, there will be others, but this is one way where we're trying to make sure that we will have state-of-the-art new 5G NTN standard MBS service. Okay, very good. We'll go back to the question in a minute, but there are lots of questions on direct-to-device and direct-to-handheld. So I would like to move to the D2D, DTHH part of this panel. So the question is really, we heard a lot about different service offering, direct-to-handheld, direct-to-device, in different form and flavor, generally between agreements or partnership between MNOs and SNO, using different type of spectrum, terrestrial and satellite spectrum, and with the roadmap moving from basic SOS alerts to voice, and then more robust service offering like internet access and video streaming. So what is the panel view about direct-to-device? What do we see as regulatory barriers to that? What kind of market and regulatory risk do we see for incumbents or new operator to offer direct-to-device? What is the panel view on this very, very promising market that everybody talks about, multi-billion-dollar market? What is realistic and what is not? And how do you see this management of technology and frequencies between terrestrial and satellite? Maybe, I don't know, maybe we want to start with Jennifer this time. Jenny, what's your view on direct-to-device, direct-to-handheld take?
Certainly. So maybe starting with the regulatory, we've talked about the two different flavors. So starting with the MSS flavor, there's really nothing that needs to be done regulatorily there. To the extent you have harmonized spectrum, globally harmonized spectrum, and that's why I think you're seeing folks with L and S band in particular being early deployers of kind of what I call early 3GPP, the Skylo type bullet devices with two-way texting, the Apple Global Star. There's really nothing that needs to be done from a regulatory perspective. It's there today, and it's really waiting for the standards, or not so much the standards, but the ecosystem to catch up. It gets a little harder when you're talking about, or say as a spectrum manager, a lot harder when it gets to the terrestrial. So today, under ITU radio regulations, and I'll try not to get too weedy, you can't use, if you're operating a non-conforming service in an allocated spectrum band. So for instance, mobile satellite, you're putting your terrestrial spectrum, mobile spectrum on a satellite, you're operating under a radio regulation 4.4, which means you have to operate in a non-harmful interference basis. So that is something that is going to be addressed at WRC 27. It was an issue that was raised by a number of countries. Is, you know, we want to enable direct-to-device using terrestrial spectrum, but we have this real barrier, which is the spectrum is not allocated for the use, and we're concerned about interference. It's a lot easier in a country like the United States, where the FCC just adopted an order last week on supplementary coverage by space, than a country like Germany, which I believe has 9 shared borders. You also have issues with countries where you don't have nationwide licensees. Maybe the licensees for terrestrial are more segmented into, you know, provinces, county, whatever. So you've got to deal with the interference issues. You know, some countries are going ahead without that. The United States issued their rules. I know Panama has rules. I know some other countries allow it, but I think Bruno had brought this up. earlier, this is going to be one of the issues, which is there will be interference at some point, and how do you deal with that? You know, the ITU is a body that I think very highly of, but is not an enforcement body. So these are going to have to be resolved on a case-by-case basis by the countries that are involved or within the country. So I think that's probably an important one. The other issue I'd put up is consumer expectations. We've talked about, you know, my mother doesn't care how she gets her connectivity. She wants to have her cell phone. She wants it to work. How are you going to do public interest obligations? We've talked a little bit about the great things ESA and the European broadcasting groups are doing in Europe on alerting and so forth. But what about emergency calling? What about direct-to-device emergency alerting, which isn't broadcast? So there's going to have to be thought given to what do these regulatory structures look like as customers are expecting certain responses from their device. So I think those are just maybe two things I wanted to touch on. Antonio, I'll let other people build on that.
Good. Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Maybe Faisal, what's your view on this satellite direct to handheld, and how do you see the whole potential market from your take it from the MNO side?
You know, from our perspective, we think it's an important sector. It's going to be bridging the digital divide and enabling that. But I think that is, as Jennifer pointed out, there's some challenges that operators have. Obviously, there's a higher regulatory burden for terrestrial carriers, and how the regulation will evolve over that. Simple point, lawful intercept. How will that work when we're talking about seamless connectivity, right? So therein lies some of the challenges. Now, I think what will be super interesting is next month we'll begin the work around the ITU work around direct to device coming up in Geneva, and I think that's really where, you know, we said at the beginning we're at that start. But I think what I find the most interesting inflection point is it's the MNOs and the SNOs coming together in a room to try and work out what the way forward is, and that's the big change that I see. So, you know, yes, there is a lot of traction in this area, as I mentioned earlier. You know, T-Mobile US with SpaceX, for example, and Starlink, and Vodafone and Kuiper coming into the mix. So, you know, there is a lot of interest around direct to device, but I think ensuring that we have the right regulatory framework to it, and when I say right, I mean, you know, enabling the future innovation, because, you know, that's going to be absolutely key. And, you know, how we evolve this space over the next few years will be critical to the success of the seamless connectivity in non-terrestrial networks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Faisal. Joe, is this something you consider in your roadmap, or at least do you have a take on the direct-to-device topic as a whole? What is your view on the opportunities and challenges of this service?
At this moment, I think that there are more challenges than opportunities. Okay, that we can not only look on the technical perspective, which for sure is something that is going to happen, but on the sustainability of the business model. I think that we have not still discovered which is the business model that we work on. That it's the mobile operators have been deploying base stations in places where the people live, and this even does it's a challenge for the mobile operators capex. Now what we are planning is to deploy a full satellite constellation that will cover all the places where for sure it will be a business model, a sustainable business model, like US, but US is 3% of the world. But at the same time, in places like India, where the RPU is less than €2 a month, and there are two absolute different places where you have the same infrastructure to cover. Then what we see is that the wideband and the voice business model will be sustainable once the mobile phones implement specific frequencies and powers for connecting to satellites in order to reduce the cost of this deployment of the satellite infrastructure. Okay, this may happen maybe just using a more efficient waveform will be enough in order to make this change of the needed infrastructure up there. Okay, why now? What we believe is that there is a business model that it may work, which is text messaging, which is the first step in order to have this full coverage everywhere, based on NB-IoT, based on the standard protocol and the standard frequencies that are, as Jennifer says, that are fully harmonized everywhere in the world, MSS frequencies. And this is something that, is it an intermediate step in order to go to the final one, to have a full wideband or Netflix access everywhere in the world? I don't know, okay, but I think that it will last longer than we expected.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much for this reality check. Bruno, is direct-to-device in Intelsat's plans?
We're looking at it, of course, very careful. Not every day, but we have project initiatives going on. We are partnering with a company that is developing some technology there, and as you know, we also ventured into high altitude platform, which is another way to provide NTN services over dense area. But I think all the panelists hit the issues and the opportunities on the head. I mean, it's a question. If you look at it from a technology perspective, the lowest barrier to entry is to reutilize the existing phones and therefore the existing spectrum. And if you do that, then Jaume made the point that, well, to avoid interference, and to make it, reasonable in terms of cost, you're going to start by launching, very low bandwidth type of services. Because then the signal is in the noise, the interference issue goes, kind of away. And these services, I have no doubt they can be deployed, but then it's, and they can be affordable by people around the world that don't have the ARPU, means to pay. I mean, basically for this type of services, that text and maybe modest voice services could work this way without too many modification. To go then to think that we can do broadband direct to device, it's first the cost in the sky would be are literally astronomical, and then you need to resolve all these border and spectrum issues, and so we're gonna have to look at that. So you're gonna have the people that have the willingness to pay are people from more developed countries that want coverage everywhere, but that's a smaller market. And then the people that have less than $1 ARPU, that's going to be a much lower type of service. So a constellation to do everything would be too difficult to make. It's you're gonna have to pick your battle. That's my view on this. Now that being said, venturing into this IoT is a good business model for this. There's no doubt, and we're going to go at it progressively.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we talk about the use case, we talk about the economic value, talk about technology. There's a question online, very timely, from Lyndon, that's about regulatory issues. So what are the regulatory issues that need to be addressed to ensure successful terrestrial and non-terrestrial? So I would like perhaps to pose a question, and I would like perhaps to pose it to Jennifer, which is top expert on regulatory work, few decades on regulatory issue and written books about regulatory issue, spectrum and regulatory. So Jennifer, perhaps on behalf of the panel, you could address this question from Linda, and also in what ways can providers overcome regulatory and policy barriers to implement integrated NTN infrastructure? Are there any specific regulatory frameworks or international agreement that need to be addressed? Is there any implication from the recent WRC 2023, or perhaps looking forward to WRC 2027 with respect to satellite and cellular convergence? So perhaps give us just a 3 minutes brief on the many, many years of work on regulatory aspect. What has already happened, what is still to happen for this TN and TN convergence to be fully realized from the regulatory perspective?
So thank you, and thank you for the build-up. So I hope I can live up to your expectations. So I already discussed the difference between terrestrial and satellite spectrum, and using the satellite spectrum, of course, is much easier because it's available today. I'm not saying the terrestrial isn't available today, it's just a lot more complex. So I do think that countries, as I said, at Work 23, there was a decision to have an agenda item, 1.13, if I remember correctly, which in America, 13 is not a lucky number, so let's hope it's luckier for the advocates, to look at this in a wide range of bands. So it goes from just under I think it's 384 to 2.7 gigahertz. So there's a tremendous amount of frequencies that are being looked at. The focus, of course, is on the ones in what we call recommendation 1036, which is the bands that are identified for IMT terrestrial today. So even though we're looking at a wide bandwidth, so that meeting starting in late April, early May, and that's our first meeting. And the focus of that is allocating the spectrum to MSS, and if there's any other regulatory efforts. So do you need to, is there, so let's say there's a decision that we're going to look at certain bands, you've got to do the studies. And remember, terrestrial is not the only service that's in band or adjacent band. So not only are you looking at the in band, but you're looking at the adjacent band. And, I expect there'll be as we go through the studies, this is going to be quite complex. Some of those frequency bands already have MSS allocations, the LNS bands are included. Should those be looked at? What are you doing if you're doing that? Are there other regulatory guideposts you want to adopt? I mean, you can't do it really in the table of allocations, but we came up with the concept of identification of spectrum, which doesn't have any regulatory meaning really, legally, but do you create another guidepost? Maybe you do an identification for supplementary coverage, because you're going to want harmonization ultimately of these bands. Is that enough? Do you change recommendation 1036? I don't know. You've got these very real public interest issues, which is how do you do lawful intercept? How do you do emergency calling? And that's going to be much more on a national level. Perhaps there can be encouragement at regional organizations like CTEL or CEP. But I think those are critical areas you're going to have to address. And then individual countries still have to put in place their own rules. If you're looking at the US proposal, the US rules, we do leasing. Is that going to work in other countries? Are the governments going to charge additional fees? Who gets licensed for what? I think one of the big issues is how do the devices get type accepted, and how do they get licensed? Do you need 2 type acceptances? Do you need 1? Do you need 2 licenses? 1? All of this has to be, and that's true for MSS or terrestrial SES. So you've got these many different issues. I think, the ITU will deal with the allocation, the spectrum issues, but you're going to have the regions and individual countries really look at this. And I think also countries have to decide they want to get involved. Do they, I think we're going to see some countries where perhaps information is more controlled. Maybe they don't want these services in their country, or they want to have them in a more controlled manner. So it's going to take time, I think, for this to flesh out. So with that, I will stop.
Very good, Jennifer. Thank you very much. I think you, as usual, gave very clear and comprehensive overview of all the various issues at stake, but also the complexity of some of these topics which need to be addressed in the near future. That's fantastic. Our time is almost running up. I think we have 1 or 2 minutes left. Maybe we hold it for a couple more minutes. I would like to have a quick round just looking to the future. Of course, this is a very positive panel. It's a very distinguished panel looking positively to the future. So moving forward on the roadmap of convergence integration and moving from 5G to 6G, I know operators, especially terrestrial operators, are very much looking to monetizing 5G. However, studies and the standardization, the academia, R&D is progressing quickly towards 6G, so much that we have 6G conference. Next week, there will be an ETSI, ESA, GSOA conference in Sofia Antipolis talking about 6G and NTN. So I guess the very quick question for this panel is, as we are operators are looking to monetize in 5G, at the same time, ESA will be launching a 6G in orbit laboratories in the next year or so. So looking ahead, what factors, in your view, will shape the future landscape of global connectivity and service delivery? What kind of new application are we looking forward to the 6G era. Does satellite needs to join the 6G roadmap now, and for what reasons? So looking to the future in the next 5 to 10 years, very quickly, perhaps starting with Jaume, and everyone is welcome to have a very quick answer to this one.
Yeah, really quick. I think that the answer of if we have to join, the mobile industry will be there, the satellite industry has to be there together. And I think that the 6G is the first opportunity to design something from zero in order to integrate those two worlds.
Thank you very much. Bruno, please.
Yeah, sure. Just one word just before to complement what Jennifer was mentioning about the regulatory framework. I just want to reemphasize for the people who are listening that a lot of these comments apply to the complexity of implementing D2D, but as we discussed before, to clarify, a lot of the NTN implementation can be conforming with the existing regulatory framework today with existing satellites and so on. So just so that it's very clear that there's a complexity of D2D, but there is the regulatory framework already in place for many, many NTN applications. So when we look at 6G, I'm on the board of ADIS, in North America, where we have all the top ICT companies looking at this. I think, as Jaume said, it's very important to be at the table early. That being said, not to rush it, because people need still to absorb 5G and see how we're going to monetize this, and that's important. The key topics that are being discussed for 6G are around security, traceability of the ecosystem, and making sure if we have terahertz type of capabilities, we are able to trace the security of these systems in the future. Introducing AI to perhaps manage our spectrum. Look, we talked a lot about the spectrum complexity, and anyone who has looked at the table of allocation just gets a headache just looking at it. And we meet every 4 years to adopt that. So there's a bit of a gut feel that maybe machines, could maybe optimize this a bit better in real time. If we're to put some intelligence at the edge, some part of the spectrum could be shared better. It's going to have to happen between constellations by sharing information, sensing the environment. This is part of the 6G environment, and how AI could help with a bit of spectrum sharing and maximizing the use of resources. I think that'd be very promising.
Great insight. Thank you very much, Bruno. Faisal, what's your view on the future?
Yeah, I was going to say, just to echo some of the comments. Operators are struggling with monetization for 5G. That's why we've seen 5G standalone slow down in terms of their deployments. Now, in reality, when we talk about 6G, yes, it's there. It's important to be part of the conversation, but we have to be mindful around monetization, and that's really what's gonna drive a lot of the activity. Things move slower in space, as I'm reliably informed, than what they do in terrestrial networks. So I think that the inflection point is working together on developing what that 6G future will look like, and I think that's something new, and that's what we should focus on in building.
Fantastic, thank you, Faisal. And the last word, of course, to our lady for the panel, Jennifer. Please, can you just the last word for you to end in a high note?
Sure. So I just want to say I agree with Bruno. There's a lot less regulatory issues when you're looking at broadband issues and using pure satellite spectrum. But I go back to that we're looking at 6G to be the internet of the senses. So I agree with Bruno as well. That's going to take a different change in a model on how we go through regulation. I was shocked at Work 23 that we did not end up with a future agenda item that started to really reshape how spectrum is used from an allocation and service perspective. So I do think that is going to end up, whether it's 6G or 7G or 8G, but I do expect by the time we get to the next conference, and as we go through the 6G discussion, which I think satellite needs to be there on day one, so I'm happy we're moving forward, is that we're going to have to start to look at whether what we have right now is the right regulatory approach, or does it have to change when we have things like AI and a need to really sense everything. So I'll leave it on that.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much. I'm afraid our time is up. We are 5 minutes late. I'm conscious we still have about 140 people online. So with this last note, I would like to perhaps thank everybody for joining online, for the massive participation and the very, very interactive set of question and answer. We tried to address as many questions as we could as part of the panel. The questions which we didn't manage to answer will be answered offline in a few days and distributed by the GSOA office. So don't forget to catch up on past webinars from GSOA, and also I think there's in a chat future upcoming webinar as well, which you can find at the GSOA website, gsoasatellite.com. I'd like to thank you so much, my esteemed set of panelists, great colleagues, great friends. Thank you so much for your openness, your participation, your contribution and involvement. I'm really, really grateful. Thanks GSOA for this. And I hope everybody online enjoyed the webinar as much as we did. So on behalf of the whole panel, I would like to say thank you all very much and look forward to meet you in some of the next event and perhaps celebrate a common joint award next year between TN and NTN contributors from collective set celebrating new high success. But thank you again. Have a good afternoon, good morning, good evening, or good night, wherever you're based, and look forward to the next session.